people who have always aspired for more, who've always aspired to do better, who've always accepted that not because your mother didn't go to secondary school, you should go. It has always been the other way around. You should aspire.
You've been there for a long time. Want to be queen of St. Andrews, but yet the problems around you you're not seeing. You can pray yourself out of the problems in St. Andrews.
Some persons were getting pension after 2 terms in office, right? And the persons that work for 26 years plus not getting anything. It's just unfair.
God is good, and God looks after me. You know, not just my wife is no longer here, so both herself and the father up there are looking after me very, very well indeed.
Not a few people that you pick up by the side of the road to run an election, to run in an election. These are not people that you mustered up and you pull together a few months before you think an election is going to call, and you say, we want to win an election, so let's come together.
Hi everyone, thanks for checking.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
Tell us, a commissioner of police, tell the politician, back off. You have no knowledge of the law. You have no knowledge of law enforcement. You cannot force my officers to do the wrong thing.
But that is somebody's son. That is somebody's child. That is part of a family. And I think that is the part that they are missing out.
Because E and F are apt to be used oppressively. It's like because we don't see disabled people as sexual beings, which is ridiculous.
You mean they don't want to listen to your version of science? They have their own science. You have your science.
We need to do is teach people to think and not what to think.
Today, it's too bad that everybody do what they want.
If I could forgive Bernard Ford, then I could forgive Bob Morris too. And today, on this day, I no more have anything in my heart for what he did.
The education system has to be very fluid and dynamic because we're living in very different and changing times.
Treating all your citizens equally, all your citizens fairly, recognizing each group, not discriminating against one or the other.
A pleasant good morning to our viewers and listeners, and we welcome you to the September 15th edition of the Bub Report. I am your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bub. Now, for this week's editorial, we explore the increasingly hostile and toxic political environment that is prevalent in Grenada today. This hostile environment, while it is not new, is given rocket fuel as a result of the echo chambers created by the increasing use of social media platforms. This digitized tribal landscape is really manufactured for having an intolerance for opinions and perspectives that do not conform to one's worldview. Only last week, we witnessed several examples of social media battles involving citizens on different sides of the political spectrum, in some cases weaponizing their following to go after opponents, some of whom harbor no political affiliation. Then there are the politicians who will not appear on some platforms to break bread with those on the other side of the aisle. Here on the Bub Report, there are many guests who will be reluctant to appear alongside another guest because of who that person might be. In fact, whenever we invite certain guests, the first question always is, who is the other person? They have become comfortable with appearing on platforms where their followers reside and are okay with speaking to their echo chambers alone, without a care for reaching unaffiliated audiences. We have also become a society, in essence, where everyone is talking about each other and talking past each other without having the intellectual maturity to talk to each other. However salacious and entertaining back and forth jabs and battles on social media may seem, the underlying threat beneath this toxic digital phenomenon is the immense development of groupthink, where individuals conform to a like-minded group, so much so that offering a different perspective in these spaces becomes extremely risky. Groupthink eventually breeds herd mentalities, causing individuals to forego critical thinking for factional acceptance. These bubbles crafted on the internet have served to divide Grenadians into hostile digital territories, thus precluding any ability for a sober meeting of the minds. These bubbles also dramatically amplify confirmation bias. Consuming information that conforms to our ideas of the world is easy and pleasurable. Consuming information that challenges us to think in new ways or question our assumptions is indeed frustrating and difficult. This is why partisans of one political stripe or the other tend not to consume the media of the other. As a result, an information environment built on clicks and likes will favor content that supports existing notions about the world over content that challenges them. In shaping what we see, algorithmic bubbles show us a distorted map and not the terrain. In so doing, they trick our brains into thinking that this is the reality. And as technology improves and the ability of some platforms to show the same story to 100 different people using 100 different methods, the political divisions therefore become deeper. We begin to lose track of what's filtered and what's not, as information becomes tailored to cement our existing opinions. After all, everyone wants to read a post that agrees with them. So let us ponder on that. Viewers and listeners, this is the Bub Report. We will be back with our first segment of the week, where we will be joined by Bishop Devon Rashay, who was instrumental in mobilizing support from the Samaritans Purse, philanthropic and faith-based organization for Hurricane Beryl relief efforts in Grenada. Please stand by.
We seek the truth.
Would you be handing your resignation to the Minister of Culture tomorrow, sir?
No, I will not.
The leader of the opposition, you have accused your government, sir, of using the Grenada Development Bank to facilitate the financing of personal loans for certain government ministers.
The other side is in no position to talk about those issues, and I will leave it there.
We discover new perspectives.
You know his leadership style, and so many are saying, why are you coming now to talk about those issues?
Now is the time to speak. You have the right to decide who will take over.
And you met with Dr. Mitchell, and perhaps you might want to confirm what that meeting was about in your response. But
Dr. Mitchell, like myself, are Grenadians.
We ask the right questions.
Why was there no report on the work done of the commission? And how is this new committee different from the commission that was initially established back in 2022? So who are these elements that are using you?
I'm disappointed in my political leader.
And why is that animating those political conversations now?
This is a very interesting question.
The Bub Reports with Dr. Kelon Bub. Thought-provoking, truthful, unbiased, and truly original reporting.
And viewers and listeners, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bub Report. If you're just joining us, please remember to like and share this week's live stream. If you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe to the Bub Reports YouTube page. Remember, you can also catch this program as a repeat broadcast on WPG 10 television this evening at 8 p.m., as well as on GBN television this coming Wednesday at 5 p.m. That's every Wednesday at 5 p.m. on GBN TV and every Sunday evening at 8 p.m. on WPG 10 television. And for this week's program, viewers and listeners, we now sit with Bishop Devon Rashay of the Agape Ministries in Grenada and a representative of the Samaritans Purse, philanthropic and faith-based organization. He is, in fact, the regional operations coordinator for one of their subdivisions, which is Operations Christmas Child for the Caribbean and the Pacific. Now, less than 24 hours after Hurricane Beryl made landfall in northern Grenada and in Carriacou, the Samaritans Purse DC-8 cargo aircraft departed Greensboro, North Carolina, with 600 rolls of tarpaulin, 3,000 solar lights, a desalination water unit, 300 collapsible jerry cans, and a mobile medical unit. In addition to these emergency relief supplies, the cargo plane also transported 13 disaster response specialists to Grenada. According to a press release from the organization, they said, quote, "This rapid deployment and mobilization of humanitarian aid and resources is aimed at providing critical support to the island communities and families anticipated to be most affected by the storm. Most importantly, Samaritans Purse is deploying to bring help and the hope of Jesus Christ to families who are grappling with severe loss in the aftermath of the storm, unquote. And now we're happy to be joined by Bishop Devon Roche of Samaritans Purse. Bishop Roche, welcome to the Bub Report. I believe this is your very first time appearing on the program, so we're happy to have you, sir.
Yeah, it is really a pleasure, and not just to be on this program, but to be here with you, someone who is just from the vicinity where I grew up and so on. So at least we have that commonality. Really a pleasure. Good morning or good day to all your viewers and listeners. It's really a pleasure to be able to be on and share with you guys today.
Yes, we are both past students of the St. Joseph's RC Primrose. I'm sure our the principal there now, Teacher Patsy, and all of the teachers will be very proud of the paths we have taken professionally in life.
Most certainly. We have done justice to the work and sacrifice.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, Bishop, let us first talk about Operations Christmas Child. And of course, yes, Samaritans Purse is in the news now, and they've always been in the news whenever disasters happen. But we have to appreciate that this work does not begin and end in disaster zones. So let us talk about the work that you do and the work of your organization.
Definitely. Samaritans Purse has several projects and initiatives that is implemented by the organization. Our disaster response is well known globally because in those cases, these things are usually covered on the news. But outside of disaster response, there are projects that are run throughout the year. We have Operation Heal Our Patriots, for example, that is run in the United States. And the project that I'm really part of is actually Operation Christmas Child. And it is the biggest initiative of Samaritans Purse. This project is implemented in over 150 countries worldwide. And we have been able to minister to many children who are in need around the world utilizing this program. And the model of the program is very simple. In actuality, what the program involves, it is the packing of shoeboxes, and these gifts are packed and given to children between the age of 2 to 14 in various countries. Grenada is one of the countries that receive every year a container of those gifts. In this last period, we worked in St. Andrew. We have many other countries in the region that receive loads and loads of containers of gifts around the year. And it is something that is done in partnership with local churches. And so those churches utilize these gifts, share the gospel. There's a 12-week discipleship that is done following this. And these partners come in really handy whenever there's disaster response, as they are the partners who are able to really reach the persons in need and give Samaritans Purse the connectivity on the ground whenever there's disaster response.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, Bishop, let us peel the curtains back a little bit in respect of Hurricane Beryl. Now, can you talk about when you came to the conclusion that the work that Samaritans Purse does in respect of disaster relief would be needed in Grenada and its dependencies?
I mean, some people obviously would say, based on the approach that we utilize, probably we should have had more faith, but there is sometimes need to be grounded in reality. And after looking at the tracking of the hurricane a couple of days before the hurricane, especially on the last day of June, which was a Sunday, I remember clearly because we had Sunday service in our church building at River Road. And then following that, in the evening period, looking at the tracking, I recognized that we needed to take precaution. River Road is a flood-prone area. And besides that, the building that the church is occupying is a pretty old building. So I went to the building with several of the volunteers from our local church. We were taking down speakers, packing away our screens and chairs and all of that. And during that time, I was on the phone chatting with persons from Samaritans Purse who are involved directly in mobilization for disaster relief. It was quite funny, and the volunteers found it funny because I had to put the phone on speaker to facilitate a Zoom meeting while at the same time I'm packing and preparing because of the urgency of time. So Sunday evening, we were talking about what we should load into the plane. I remember while I was speaking to them, they were actually mobilizing. The packing had started on Sunday evening. Although at the time we still had people who were praying that Grenada would not be impacted. But we felt that even if we pray and we have faith, we need to take precaution just in the event that we are impacted. And basically, based on the tracking of the hurricane, we felt that there may be some impact, even if it was the outer band. There may be some impact. And the question was asked of me, what would be the items that would be needed? And I said, naturally, from the experience I had with Hurricane Ivan, and for persons who are viewing, they may remember that post-Hurricane Ivan, you had all of these tarpaulin houses that were built in Grenada, temporary transitional houses, and those were done by Samaritans Purse at the time. So I indicated that taps were very important, and as you mentioned, that was one of the first things to come in, rolls of tarpaulin. Usually every roll will give you 5 20 by 20 feet of tarpaulin to give to a family. So one roll basically will service one household in the initial distribution. So we spoke about tarpaulin, we spoke about food. In the initial discussion, we thought that we should not bring food in because as we were discussing at the time, if there is a hurricane and the whole of Grenada is not affected, it may make sense to support the local economy by buying food locally and distributing to affected areas. So food wasn't loaded on the initial carrier. However, we talk about desalination plant because we know that infrastructure for distribution of water and so on usually is affected in the light of disaster. And we spoke about jerry cans, which is bottles that you can really blow up to help transport water. If you have a plant, you will need to fill those bottles and distribute water in a very fast manner. So that was going to be the initial response. Then we had discussion about the field hospital because we usually mobilize field hospitals around the world when there's disasters. In fact, when we had the uptick of COVID here in August, at the time I had spoken to the Minister of Health concerning that was August during the COVID period, right? I had spoken to the Minister of Health concerning whether, there's need for our field hospital if there was an overrun of our local medical facilities. So he had that knowledge as a backup plan, just in case there was a need that I can make the contacts that we can have support from Samaritans Purse Field Hospital.
And that was Minister Steele at the time, Minister Nicholas Steele, when you say Minister of Health, yes. Yes.
So, and basically, when we respond to disasters, what we do is utilize our church network within the respective countries to help do swift needs assessment. Because one of the advantages of churches is that they're located everywhere. And once you are able to make contact with pastors, they're able to give you a pretty quick idea as to what is happening in the respective communities in terms of damage, needs, and all of that. So on Sunday evening, I already had put the pastors on notice that Samaritans Purse will be coming in. But however, Dr. Bob, you will remember that there was a curfew in place that came into place pretty early. I guess NADMA had learned from what happened during Hurricane Ivan with all of the looting and so forth.
Correct.
So the curfew came in place, and I don't know if it was precautionary or if it was as a result of the hurricane, but we were out of power and also running water at a certain time just before Beryl and immediately after Beryl. Fortunately, the community where I live in Calavini, we got electricity back within 24 hours. But most of the country wasn't as fortunate. So I remember the day of the hurricane, just after we were hit by Beryl and learning about the destruction that took place to the north of Grenada and Carriacou and Martinique, that I had to figure out how to reach people to try to coordinate this, because as we'll appreciate, you cannot land a carrier on an airport without informing the authorities that this is coming in. So I tried reaching several persons within the government. At the time, I was unable to reach anyone. And then I reached out to someone within the executive of the governing party. And they were able to give me the number for the manager, the operations manager at the airport. And I was able to reach her. I was trying to reach NADMA. It was curfew. I couldn't even reach the police station. So I took my vehicle and drove to the Carriacou to inform them that I was trying to mobilize a response and that I wanted to identify that is the reason why I needed to be on the road to go to NADMA. So then they gave me the permission to drive to the NADMA facility in Monjalou. Although Monjalou is closer to where I live than the police station, but I figured that since it's a state of emergency, I'll have to get some type of permission from them to make the necessary contact. When I got to NAMA facility, I wasn't really able to speak to anyone there. They were in meetings and so forth. But I was able to speak to the airport. The airport indicated that they were closed and they would have to be inspected, right, before they are able to receive a carrier. And as such, we had to make a decision from our end. They gave me some assurance that they felt the infrastructure at the airport wasn't damaged, but just the process of inspection will take some time. We took a decision.
And when you say inspection here, you mean inspection of the runway facility at the airport?
That's
and
correct.
The tarmac, I guess, to accommodate incoming aircraft. Okay.
Incoming aircraft, right? They told me that the airport will be open by 3 p.m. That's the earliest it will be open. And we took a decision that the flight would leave, well, by faith, before the airport officially opened. And this is one of the reasons why we were the first to come in, because we were already airborne before the airport was open. The worst case scenario is that if they were not able to accommodate us, we would have to land at another airport nearby and wait for the airport to open. But we took that decision, and by 3 p.m. the airport was officially open, and we were able to land the aircraft. The operations manager was really cooperative in terms of making contact with government, because you had to inform them that you're coming in. Usually, when Samaritans Purse go into any country, they will officially inform the government of that country that they're intending to come in, what it is the intention, and so forth. So we could not reach government officials on the ground in Grenada. So Samaritans Purse, being based in the United States, officially wrote the ambassador in the US, informing them of the intent to come in with relief supplies. And
so it was a case here where Samaritans Purse, by way of protocol, owing to the fact that none of you were able to reach local government officials in Grenada at the time, wrote to, of course, that's Ambassador Tali Francis, who is based in Washington, D.C. He is Grenada's representative to the United States. Okay, so that is what occurred there. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, so he was written to officially inform of the intent to come in, and they had to find a consignee. Well, our Church Agape Ministries became the local consignee. So all of the relief items will be consigned to our church, because Samaritans Purse is not a registered NGO in Grenada. So they needed somebody in this end to have all of the goods that are coming in consigned to. So it was consigned to our church, and they came in, as you mentioned in the opening statement. We had several teams of relief professionals who are trained to manage this types of situation, who came in. The initial load came in, 1/3 of the load stayed in Grenada to be distributed to the north of the country, and then we placed the rest on a barge to take to Carriacou. And I must say that the port, Grenada Port Authority, was really cooperative, because coming from the plane, they allowed us to load those things into a container on the port the very same day, so that it can get on a barge. And just so that you know, all of the barges that operate locally, or those big boats, when I speak about the barges, I speak about those large boats that carry cargo. All of those that operate locally, to my understanding, based on what was told to me, went south to Trinidad as a result of preparation for the hurricane. So when our relief came in, the boats were not yet in Grenada. So we had to wait for the boat to actually arrive so that we can ship to Carriacou. So that's a little bit of background as to how we are able to respond so quickly to the disaster situation.
Very interesting, because the impression was given that at least credit was given initially, and this is not about giving credit or anything like that. Of course, credit should be given to everyone who support, but the impression was given as if it was the ambassador in Washington, D.C., who initially made contact with Samaritans Purse, who then followed up on their request to then get into Grenada. We also saw when Samaritans Purse arrived, we did not see you there to welcome the delegation or anything like that, unless perhaps you were there and the cameras did not pan to show you there. But is there a reason why you were not at the airport, sir, or were you actually busy doing a lot of background work? Or perhaps I'm mistaken.
Yes, thanks for asking this so that things can be clarified. So yes, the ambassador did not make the original request to Samaritans Purse to come in. Samaritans Purse actually wrote to the ambassador, and then feedback came. I still have a copy of the letter because I was copied in the communication. Regarding the presence of the aircraft, I was present to welcome the aircraft when it came in. The staff at the airport will be able to verify this. In fact, on that day, the airport was understaffed, right? So we were delayed extensively on the tarmac because the forklift that we were using was one of those that could not carry our desalination plant. We had to kind of improvise, use some of the rolls of tarpaulin to kind of roll the desalination plant off the cookie sheet. It's a flat sheet that carries those things from the carrier and so on. So yes, I was there to welcome the party. Not just as I was there, but there's another gentleman who also attends our local church, and he is one of the persons that volunteers with Samaritans Purse as well. He lives in Grenada and was present once he knew that they were coming in. So we are the two persons who from Grenada was present on the tarmac together with several drivers of trucks. There were some persons who volunteered their trucking services to really move the items. And some of these people are actually unsung heroes. And this is why it really bothers me when persons seem to be looking for credit. Because to me, in this type of situation, it shouldn't be about credit. Really, it should be about just serving the people. Because those of us, we passed through Ivan, and we knew the distress that happened the morning after Ivan. I could remember the level of distress that I felt personally. And that is the thing that really stirred me into action, knowing what it was like for me and my family just in the immediate aftermath of Hurricane Ivan. So even if my house wasn't damaged by Hurricane Beryl, I could relate in my mind to what was being experienced by the people in Carriacou, Martinique, and the north of Grenada. And that's what spurred me into action. But there are persons outside of myself whose name people would never hear. The persons who give the trucks, the persons who give their boats to move the items to Carriacou, local pastors and other volunteers who showed up at the Gateway Assembly to have low tarpaulin when the first flight came in. The pastors who so readily did assessment in their communities and send in numbers so that within 24 hours, and this is the first time that this has happened in years in a hurricane situation, where within 24 hours of a disaster, not only did the plane come in, but we had persons receiving tarpaulin in the north of Grenada within 24 hours. Some people do not know this, but the north of Grenada actually got relief before even Carriacou because we had to wait for the boat to come up from Trinidad, and that delayed us several hours while we were waiting for the boat to arrive. There are persons who really worked, and I know some of the local volunteers who went to Carriacou that very first night. We were not sure what we were going to. We asked to use Pastor Happy's church in Carriacou, and when we got there, there was minor damages to the roof. There was a wall inside that was broken. The place had to be cleaned out, broken windows, and persons left Grenada going there because there was no way of communicating with persons in Carriacou at the time. So persons left there not knowing what they're going to meet, went to the church without food to stay overnight, and some of these persons ended up staying days in Carriacou. I remember persons calling me saying, we need water, we're hungry, and not just our local people, but some of our team that came in from overseas, they had to rock out in Carriacou. And to me, these are the people that really deserve the credit. These people that have made these types of sacrifices. For me, I really don't need any credit because I didn't do it for the credit. And I would do it all over again. Even if somebody else is giving the credit, I'll do it 20 times over again because really the people needed the response.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, let us talk about, let's fast forward then to getting those relief supplies. And I suspect at that point, the team, that's the Samaritans Purse team, perhaps started coordinating with the local disaster organizations, that's NADMA. Talk to us about how that unfolded.
Right. So in the initial stages, as I indicated, I wasn't able to make contact with NADMA initially. So when Samaritans Purse came in, NADMA wasn't really in the loop as to all of the relief and how it was going to be distributed and all that. They knew that Samaritans Purse was coming in. And I remember receiving a call from persons at NADMA when our second flight came in just to find out, because they needed, obviously, for their systems, to find out the relief, all of that, who's a consignee. As I mentioned, our churches, they was a consignee for the relief that was coming in. And they eventually got involved in terms of just record keeping as to what we are doing, but they were not involved in the actual coordination of the relief with Samaritans Purse. Because as people appreciate, generally Samaritans Purse work with and partner with churches. So it's very rare you'll find a situation where they are partnering in terms of distribution of relief with a government entity or whatever the case is. Obviously, the Samaritans Purse will always coordinate with these entities because you need to follow the rules and the procedures of the country. And for the case of NADMA, what they were asking of us is that they be informed as to what was coming in and what was the plan in terms of distribution. I know they had made a request initially to have persons present when we're distributing just so that they can keep record of what is happening. We did agree for them to have a physical presence. I don't think that ever really happened, but that was requested and we had agreed on that. But I must say that NADMA did not resist the efforts of Samaritans Purse, as far as I know, but they didn't play a major role in coordination either.
And the decision to set up that field hospital, I suspect, given Samaritans Purse experience around the world and with disaster relief, I was not aware of the scope of their work until a couple of years ago when one of the Samaritans Purse groups went to, I believe it was in New Orleans. That was after it might have been New Orleans or Texas, one of those locations, and they set up field hospitals there as well. So talk to us about the field hospital. I felt many people, not only myself, but many people were very impressed with the speed in which that field hospital was set up, I have to say, which speaks to that. But talk to us about the impact that field hospital had in those critical days following Hurricane Beryl.
Yeah, well, to be quite honest, as I had mentioned, the field hospital was requested since the Sunday before the hurricane. This is why it was able to happen so quickly. So the day Beryl hit, that field hospital was actually loaded. The field hospital would have been here even earlier than it got here, but we had some delay with getting approval from the Ministry of Health for the field hospital to come in, because as you'll understand, there's a lot of procedures and some people cannot be reached and all of that. And I had to kind of get involved in trying to kind of pressure, if you will, some people to say, hey, we need to do this because there are other countries affected by the Hurricane St. Vincent, which was right next to us.
Yeah.
They knew of it, and if Grenada is delaying and dragging and all of this red tape, we probably will lose the opportunity. And then we start getting some movement in terms of that. But eventually we got the approval after a lot of pleading. And then the field hospital came in because, as you will appreciate, the hospital in Carriacou was badly damaged, right? And usually coming out of a disaster, even beyond the patients that you had prior to the disaster in the particular hospital, there are other people who may have gotten other minor injuries, fractures, cuts, and so forth. Initially, they may not be thinking that those things are important to look at, but treatment needs to be given. So we made a decision to have the field hospital come in, and we decided that the best place to set it up was right next to the stadium there, because obviously there was a piece of concrete area where cars and so forth usually were parked. And we brought in the professionals who are used to setting it up. So these guys, they set it up all over the world. And we also brought in the medical professionals together with that flight with the hospital. So that once it came in, within 24 hours, it was set up. And we made a decision that the service the hospital offers must be 24-hour service. Now, I want people to appreciate that, sometimes it's easy to watch the tents and so on and say, well, just setting up some tents. But remember, you go into a situation where there's no water. You are also going to a situation where you will need to have toilets and shower facilities for the staff that is at the hospital, bed facilities and all of that. And we had to make some rapid decisions because initially we are looking to, as much as possible, support the Grenadian economy and not flying in as many things as we can avoid flying in. So for example, if we needed cots and they were available locally, why not buy them here in Grenada so that we can support the local economy as well? But some of the things we had to bring in, like the tents for showering and so forth, I know sometimes people scoff about this, but we even had to construct like pit latrines so that the staff can have that available to be used, because there wasn't enough time to construct toilets that flush and so on. So even the staff that came in as volunteers, they had to make sacrifices. Some of them may not have used a latrine before. And that had to be the facility that they used. They had to sleep in communal tents in some cases. with multiple people occupying a single tent. But they made the sacrifice because we wanted them to be on site to offer the 24-hour service, right? We also employed some local persons. So my church employed a couple of local people to help with management of the flow of people in and out of the facility, and to provide some measure of security for the patients that were there, because some patients had to stay overnight. And obviously, if you have people there overnight, you have to have some security. So our church actually had 4 persons to work there, in addition to some cleaners and so forth. And that is how the hospital operated. And once we figured that that the situation in terms of demand had started to decrease, the decision was taken to donate the facility to the Ministry of Health so that they can continue offering the health services. So all of the hospital, together with generators and all of that, was donated to the Ministry of Health so that they could continue offering care to the people once Samaritan Purse.
So outside of that hospital relief, of course, you mentioned the tents, not the tents, yes, but the tops for the residents. Of course, we know that following Hurricane Ivan, that was a critical need of shelter, right? We're going back to those basic primal human needs, right, during disasters, and as well as a desalination plant. Now, let us first and foremost talk about, you mentioned the tents that were also distributed in the north of the island in mainland Grenada, and of course the tarpaulin, distributed in northern part of Grenada, as well as in Carriacou and Petit Martinique. Were there any challenges in respect of distributing those tarpaulins at all? What did that process look like? Because I do know that in disaster zones that there can be some measure of chaos when those things, especially when it comes to distribution.
So our original method for distribution was to do it through churches. So basically what happened is that we had a distribution center at Gateway, and churches would make their requests based on the needs of the communities, not their membership, but the needs of the communities. And then they would distribute. I remember in our last day of distribution, I was still receiving calls and messages from social media from people saying there is still so much need in the north. So our church undertook to actually do a caravan where we went with trucks, right, just loaded with tops, and to just go house to house distributing. For the most part, it was smooth. Obviously, people are demanding and asking, and I must tell you, I must confess that I have a weakness when it comes to people asking for things. I don't feel that people should have to beg for things when they're in need. Like, I believe things that are available, you should give it to people. Now, in some cases, you are not able to always verify whether somebody had a legitimate need or not. But when you were in a crowd, people in the community will tell you, well, this person lost their roof, this person did this, and this person have never gotten help. So there was some sort of community verification, although you didn't have time to do an extensive damage assessment because the rain started to fall. And I remember it was rain. I could not sleep. I already could not sleep. And let me say this to persons who have not been on the ground in Carriacou and the north of the island. It is one thing to see all of the videos. It is one thing to see all of the pictures. But it's another thing when you go into a community and you look at people in their faces and you see that sense of loss, especially some persons who are in their 70s and 80s and they don't have a roof over their head. I remember going to Carriacou and someone spoke to me about going to someone who is 80-something years and sleeping on that sheet of ply. I mean, my goodness, I cannot even think about my grandmother having to sleep on that sheet of ply. And these people, for the most part, they are not able to come and push in lines. They are not able to come out, and push in the crowd. And when that first rain came, I remember I was on the tarmac in Morris Bishop Airport, and I was so concerned. So we decided to load that truck, go to the north of the island, and do house-to-house distribution of tarpaulins. And we went with some clothing. There was such a need for the clothing. By that time, the second crop had come in. So in addition to the tops that we had, we did some solar lights as well. And that was really helpful for people because with the solar lights, you were able to also charge your cell phone. So even if some of the cell phones came back up, many persons were not able to charge their phones. But with this light, you can put it out in the sun, you can have light, and you can also plug your light into the device to charge your phone. So we distributed thousands and thousands of those things. We brought in kitchen sets with basic things that you would need in a kitchen, because if your home is lost, you don't have anything. So those kitchen sets would help. And you know, the distribution was to be non-discriminatory. So this is why we didn't want to have politicians involved in the distribution. We didn't want to have activists involved. The thinking was, let us do it to the churches with the hope that they're going to be independent in their distribution. And from the feedback that we received from the North, from Carriacou, from Petit Martinique, that was done without discrimination. And I remember when we did our aerial survey of Carriacou, Dr. Bob, I'll tell you, that was something to see. When we fly over Carriacou, it was something to see. And we were not able to land initially, so the plan was to land, but we were not able to land. We had to come back to Grenada. And going up there the following day and speaking to some of the elderly people we saw in the street. You saw people in tears. Like people will see you and they just break down in tears. It's hard to see. And this is why I got so disturbed during all of this time when we were working so hard to get relief out, about people who were talking about credit and credit and credit. To hell with credit. Like, it's not about credit. It should be about the people who are waiting do not care who contacted who. The people who are waiting, they want to know that they're receiving help, and that is what matters. And we are happy to be able to be on the ground and to be able to provide that necessary help and support.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, people who are having experienced such a traumatic event, they don't care about the publicity that comes with those things. And quite frankly, my philosophy is, I think we do not agree on a lot, but I think that's one thing we can agree on, that if you're helping someone, there is no need to do that with the expressed intention of wanting to get credit for helping. At least that's those are the values that I still maintain and still remain with me from growing up in Pomerose. So
it's probably a Pomerose thing.
It probably is.
So I'll tell you, like, even my Facebook page, you know, people wanted to see what we're doing on the ground. I remember I received a photo because I was in Petit Martinique distributing tarpaulin. I was too busy in the distribution to take pictures, but there was so much talk about the lack of help for Petit Martinique. And indeed, when we got there, we realized that there was no tarpaulins on the island. We had some drama with the boat trying to get the water to Petit Martinique, and that is what caused us to bring in the helicopter and all of that. But that's a whole different story. So we went to Petit Martinique, and while I was distributing, people were asking questions in the diaspora, what's happening in Petit Martinique? And people wanted to see pictures of what's going on. So I posted some pictures on my Facebook, but I couldn't bring myself to post the pictures as they were taken, because you were seeing faces of people receiving.
I do not subscribe to that.
So I had to put emojis over those faces, and people are asking, why do you cover up the people? Because I don't believe it's good for humanity to have somebody in the lowest point line up in a line for relief and post that and feel that doing that is something good to do. I mean,
because at the end of the day, Bishop, people still have their dignity.
Yes,
it's about human dignity. And people are not sympathy cases, and they don't want to be treated as such, especially when events like that happen, and especially when we have the thing called Poor Proud in Grenada, you know, especially when you know where you were, and this hurricane overnight just came and just took everything away, you know.
Exactly. And when you put these things out there, they are out there permanently. And usually it gets you in it, because these people have lost everything. They have lost their clothes. So oftentimes they are not well dressed. The hair is not combed, because these things are not important at the time, right? And then you take them, you put them on social media so that you can be seen. To me, based on my biblical belief, that is not the way God expects us to respond to it. It never should be about the credit. It shouldn't be about putting people out there like that. So, I mean, persons who have a different view, that's fine. But I feel very strongly about these things. Even for our church, we do food baskets and so on. And I tell my team in Agape Cares that you can post all the pictures with the food items, But don't let me see any pictures with you handing that basket to someone. I don't need to see a picture.
Yeah.
That person don't need to be on camera, because it should never be about that. If you have to do good, and that has to be the price to pay for it, well, I don't think it should be done.
Right, it should not be done. Yes, precisely. Now, let us talk then about desalination, because as we know, in the context of Carriacou, two efficient ways of water distribution that has historically occurred has to do with desalination as well as water harvesting. That's the citizens on the Sister Isles have done that for eons. Yes. What is the state of the current water desal facility that Samaritans Purse brought into Grenada? Did they take that back, and is there a reason why they took that back?
Right. So we had two desalination units that was brought in here in Grenada. So we did set up two of them, one in Hillsborough and another one right next to the port, because many persons were coming to the port to collect things anyway, so it would have been convenient for them to get water there. And the week before Samaritans Purse was about to leave, I had to go to Jamaica because we were responding in Jamaica as well to Beryl. And remember that my work with Samaritans Purse is Caribbean Pacific. So I had to fly to Jamaica, met with our team on the ground that was responding there in Jamaica as well. And I believe during that time, there was some discussions that took place regarding the desalination unit. When I came back, the desalination unit was already being scrapped to ship back to the United States. But I understood that there was some communication between Samaritans Purse while I was out and the local water authority related to the possibility of using the unit, leaving the unit, so that the authorities can provide the professionals to run the unit. I understood that response to that wasn't positive, and as such, Samaritans Purse had to make the decision to actually go with the unit. Now, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus because I wasn't really intricately involved in that discourse. There may have been some other overtures as well, but I must mention to you, Dr. Bob, that one of the things I found really weird during this period as well is that I work throughout the region, the Caribbean, the Pacific. In fact, next week I'm going to the Pacific, to Vanuatu and Solomon Islands again to do some work, right? And every country that I work in for Samaritans Purse people, they treat you with respect, just respecting your office, your position, and so on. But this response here in Grenada was my first experience in my 13 years with this organization, where I found that local people would prefer to speak to the foreigners than to speak to me. It was weird, so even in terms of certain needs and so on that needed to be addressed, persons would prefer to speak to the foreigners than to speak to me, who's the local person on the ground. And I remember, as I indicated, that I have not just worked with this organization domestically, but I've also worked in the Caribbean, throughout the Caribbean and the Pacific. I remember one of the representatives from government actually met me on the tarmac together with one of the foreign representatives, and went to the foreigner to introduce himself to the person. And this person knows me really well, but he just introduced himself, didn't even acknowledge my presence, and it took the foreigner to introduce me to him and my capacity. To me, so those types of things sometimes affect how things can be facilitated and how things should rightfully happen. I believe it's a really unfortunate thing. There are other things that I'll speak about, but perhaps after all of this Carriacou situation is settled, because there are still people there in need. But I think there's a saying, a king has no honor in his own country. It's just a saying, I'm not a king and I'm not even close to it. But I'm just using this saying to say that sometimes in your own country you find that people cannot even give you the type of respect when you're trying to facilitate a situation. And I believe that perhaps if I was more integrally involved in the discourse concerning this desalination plan, somebody reached out to me, that the outcome may have been different.
Do you think, and you talk about how you were not acknowledged during that process by some individuals? I suspect those individuals are perhaps part of the government. Do you think that has anything to do with the nature of political tribalism in Grenada, that even in times of disaster, we find it difficult to coalesce around the issues that should matter and the people who would help us to address those issues at hand, such as Hurricane Beryl?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's very unfortunate, but it's one of our realities. And I saw it clearly in that time. I saw it. You're going to Carriacou and you saw it. I mean, I remember being there one of the days on the port. Persons were trying to ship items. I was present. There was a minister of government present, other persons, activists of the current administration. There was persons who are associated with the opposition party also present there, trying to get things go to diplomatic and so on. And I was in shock to see the kind of drama that was happening. I mean, I was embarrassed, to be quite honest with you, because I'm there. I came up on a boat with World Central Kitchen because I was helping World Central Kitchen mobilize some volunteers. They would do hot meals and so on as well. That's another NGO. So I actually got a ride with the boat. Some of our Samaritans Purse persons were there to receive me when I came in because we were to transfer some items to Centre Pidi Martinique. And I was really embarrassed, to be honest, Dr. Bob, to see our local people and the type of, the type of attitude towards each other when there are people there who just genuinely want to get relief to people in need. It is sad to see. Like for the life of me, and I've been in politics. I mean, I think I have a general good understanding of politics. I've been there. In 2008, I was very involved. But I still believe that there's times when there should be no politics. Like there must be times when you could forget about political parties, partisanship, because when Beryl was passing through the north of the country, Carriacou and Martinique, Beryl wasn't discriminating politically. It wasn't, oh, let me look for NMP houses or NDC houses or whatever the case is. When the water was shut off, electricity was shut off, there was not discrimination. So why should we even see party colors? It is an embarrassment and a shame. And I believe our people, the Grenadian people, have a responsibility to demand better from our people who are in positions of power on both sides when it concerns these kind of things. I believe this was a great opportunity to see politicians from different sides come, work together, put all hands on deck. Obviously, there are persons within the government. This is the first time that they may have had to deal with situations like this. There are persons who are within the NDC who was around when Ivan passed. There are persons within the NNP who had to deal with both Ivan and Emily and have experience in doing this. So I believe this was a great opportunity to bring everybody together, NGOs, CBMOs, just name it, churches, come together to work to get relief and help to the people. But the political tribalism that we see here is real, it's dangerous, it's terrible. Even imagine we're celebrating 50 years as a nation, and there are still people in Grenada who would either not put on yellow or put on red, put on green rather, because of their because of these colors association with
the party affiliation. Yeah,
it is sickening. It is really sickening. In fact, I said to someone at the 50th celebration, which was remarkable, by the way. I said to someone there, I think we should probably ask both political parties as celebration of 50 to do us a favor as a nation of choosing colors that is not part of our national colors. Like choose something else, pink, blue, orange, something else, so that at least people can feel liberated from this type of politics. People said you had to be created, that wouldn't happen. But either way, it's a big issue. It's a big issue, and yes, we cannot deny it. It affected the response. A lot of the bantering we still see in our country about relief and this and that. Politics. And people are in need, people need their homes. People care less about who wins seats and who will win seats next election. When you are waiting in the rain, you're under a tent, you don't have basic necessities and so forth. People need help, and this is what is important, what must be important, not party politics at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, can you talk about the other faith-based organizations who have come to the aid and assistance of the people of Grenada at this time?
Yes, and there are a lot of persons, there are a lot of unsung heroes, as I said. Many entities have actually come in addition to what Samaritans Purse has done. I must mention that the BGA came in with some pastoral counselors who was able to extend some sort of level of pastoral counseling and care in Carriacou. Many people do not know about this, but before I mention the faith-based organization, I just want to mention this, Dr. Bob, that Samaritans Purse actually gave grants to tons of churches to continue the relief response. So I mentioned earlier that we didn't do a lot of food. So what happened is that churches receive financial grants, and these grants were used to purchase food items to be able to contribute food baskets and so on to people across Grenada. So this way we can help the local economy at the same time as empower these churches to do that in a way that is non-discriminatory. Now, in terms of other organizations that respond, just this week, our church received some relief supplies from the Dorcas Medical Mission. They do missions all over the world, and they just sent food items again for distribution. We had to get this virus cleared and so on. And there have been other groups that came in to do health response. There are groups that came in to help with basic house repair. In fact, we actually hired persons within the last 2 weeks of our response in Carriacou to place tarpaulins on houses. We brought in some strips of wood that was used because, you know, there are some people, they receive the tarpaulin, but if you're 80-something years, you can't go on your roof to place that on.
This is true.
So we actually hired some local persons. We again of employing persons who have lost. So you lost everything. One of the ways to help you is to actually employ you, right? We couldn't pay by check, so we had to pay everybody cash. I remember having to have my wife go up to Carriacou to actually make payments to these persons who were putting on some of the tarpaulin and all of that in Carriacou. But either way, robust response. Many of the churches went in. The Alliance of Evangelical Churches went in just a few weeks ago and did some counseling response, prayer. And you may not have seen a lot of people in the forefront. Not everybody posts on social media. Not everybody put what they're doing out there. But every day, since this disaster, there have been persons going up, churches and church leaders going up to Carriacou to respond in terms of relief. And I believe that is what church is about. It's not just about coming together, singing 2 songs on a Sunday morning. All of that is important too. But the love of Christ that we preach about is really shown in situations like this, when we can, in a tangible way, demonstrate this love that we teach and preach about. When we can take from the offering that is given to us over the years and buy food items and send to people who are in need. You know, when we can take our membership and pastors can take time and go actually on the ground in these disaster areas and respond to tangible need, whether it is hot meals, whether it is food or water or whatever the case is, you know, and we were happy to, even outside of what Samaritans Purse had done, to facilitate some of this, because we brought in the helicopter. We are facing some challenges with moving items by the boat, and there were a lot of for lack of another word, a lot of bacchanals surrounding whose boat is what and who is putting gas in boat and all of that, right? I must mention here a name that really was helpful with us to translation, Clinton Bailey. Oh, tremendous Grenadian citizen. Really, we partnered a lot in transporting items to Carriacou and Martinique, right? But we brought in a helicopter and we were able to facilitate even other persons being able to respond. Some people may not know this too, but the response to many of the Union Islands of St. Vincent was actually done from Grenada. So a lot of the other St. Vincent Islands that were affected, be it Union Island, Mayo, Beckway, all of those.
Beckway, yeah, all of those places.
So we would transport relief from Grenada to those islands using the chopper on a daily basis. Even to mainland St. Vincent, we're able to respond. So the response from Grenada was really Grenada, Carriacou, Martinique, Union Island, and St. Vincent. Yes, it was a really robust response.
Yeah. Because during my vacation in Grenada, I did see the helicopter ferrying back and forth several times from Primrose, and say, "Oh, there goes the Samaritans Purse helicopter again." Really
up and down. And I must say that this is only possible because there are persons who are contributing to Samaritans Purse. I've met many of these persons who are contributing, and they're not the big billionaires or millionaires. Ordinary people who give very little to the organization, and donate. Some people I know in the diaspora, when they saw the response of Samaritans Purse, they decided to donate through Samaritans Purse to be able to respond to what was happening in Carriacou and Pitamatic. And I will tell you here, I mean, Samaritans Purse wouldn't see this, but I will tell you that the amount of investment, because you know, flying this helicopter up and down the DC-8 coming in here on 3 occasions, these things are not cheap. All of this staff and upkeep and all of that. I do not believe that Samaritan Purse, recovered by way of donations what was poured into Grenada. It was all coming from a heart and a place of love, an act of love for God first of all, and knowing that God requires us to show His love to those in need and love for the people around us.
Absolutely. Now, is there usually a best buy date in respect of Samaritan's Purse post hurricane or any kind of post disaster relief effort that they mount? Do they have a timeline when they usually depart that particular location? How is that determined?
It is determined based on the assessment. So the immediate needs, right? We looked at what has happened. So, for example, the Jamaica response was a lot shorter than the Grenada response, because in the case of Jamaica, it was mostly Manchester and St. Elizabeth that was affected in Jamaica. Those 2 parishes. So the response was very centralized to those areas, and it was just a really short response. It wasn't as extensive as Grenada. So they stayed here in Grenada for a longer period than they did in Jamaica. Now, when the Bahamas had their hurricane several years ago, they actually had to set up an office in the Bahamas. So it is really based on the magnitude of the damage and how fast the local population is emerging. Because one of the things that we try to do is to respond immediately to the immediate needs, make sure that we are very thorough in the response, and then empower the local authorities to continue the response. And so this is why most of the items that comes into the country is actually donated, so that when you leave, the response can continue. And if the feeling is that the local authority has the capacity to do that, then Samaritan Purse realizes that they can pull back. What they're trying not to create is a situation where there's absolute dependency on Samaritan Purse. The thought is come in, respond, and empower the local authorities to continue the response.
So in the context of Carriacou, Carriacou and Pitamatic and Northern Grenada, how was that determination made?
So the response initially, as I indicated from the start, what we had discussed was tarpaulin, water, the field hospital, desalination plant. Well, water through the desalination plant. So when we did our aerial survey initially, we determined how much tarpaulin will be needed for Northern Grenada, Carriacou, and Pitamatic. So we brought those tarpaulin, we helped install, and then we did a flyover and try to determine, again, based on the initial survey, how many houses now have tarpaulin. And when you fly over Carriacou and Pitamatic, even up to today, you will still see many Samaritans Purse tarpaulin. So we figured that the tarpaulin response was okay, and there was no need for a robust response in terms of tarpaulin anymore. Then, once the local authorities, now also indicated that their desalination plant was up and running, the determination was that there's probably not a need to have those running side by side. And that's what the discussion initially with NAWASA was about. How much do you need this plant? Are you prepared to have your human resource work at this plant and so on, right? So NAWASA plant, their plant was up and running, and they indicated that they had capacity to supply the water now. So it was determined that there wasn't that robust need for that supply of water anymore. And as you will appreciate, there was a lot of other responses of water, bottled water, and all of that. So once people were able to get clean water for showering, for cleaning, and all of that, then that determination was made. The field hospital, it was determined that there is still need for medical care, but you can measure by the amount of persons coming into the hospital whether or not you have this pent-up need for 24-hour service, or whether it's a need for government to have a facility for eventualities and so on, because the current hospital is not up and running. So that determination was made to, because the facility is not up and running, to donate that to the Ministry of Health, and they will be able to continue to do response. But that response wasn't just in terms of the disaster, because by then people who got fractures, cut, bruises, they had already come in. So there will be other situations as would be in a regular functioning hospital. And that would be the responsibility of the Ministry of Health, really. Then the kitchen kits and so forth were distributed based on the need assessment. The solar lights were distributed, so we evaluated and determined that most households, if not all, had a solar light, in some cases more than one solar light, and that based on that response, because we were not intending to build houses, and the feeling was that what was urgently needed at the time, even people from Carriacou and started saying that, was actually rebuilding, not really robust relief, but rebuilding of houses. And I think that is still the thing that is being clamored for out there. So from churches, as I can tell you now, what we have been doing from the end of the churches is pushing more towards organizations that can actually help with the building. If you can come and you can build 2 houses, 3 houses, 4 houses, even if you cannot bring the material, but you can provide labor to build, right? That's where the direction that the push is. There is still some need out there for water, for food, and all of that. And it's not because people don't have cash coming in, but the access to resources at the time was limited because tellers wasn't operating, banks were not functioning, and all that. Those of you who went through Ivan, you remember what that was like. You could have had $1 million in the bank, you couldn't have access to it. All of us were the same thing. So that was why we felt there was an immediate need for food and all of that, even for people who probably otherwise would have been economically well off, right? So we use that to determine when it was time to actually withdraw.
Absolutely. This, Bishop Rashay, this certainly has been a very, very informative segment, and I believe you were able to answer a lot of the questions. Some of those, I think, those unanswered questions were, quite frankly, urban legends and rumors. So you were able to clear a lot of those up. Bishop, over to you for some closing comments.
Sure. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I also want to thank you for what you're doing in terms of journalism. I believe that we need persons like yourself who can be independent and who can really ask that questions and get truth out there to the public. And I appreciate this opportunity as well to be able to answer questions, some of which I didn't even know was out there, but to answer and provide whatever clarity. I just want to make an appeal to all people, our Grenadian people, and including Carriacou and Pigeon Valley, that at the end of the day, we are one people. And whenever anything affects us, one of us, it should affect all of us. This is a very small community, and you may not know it, but there are people out there who are affected by this disaster that you are in some way related to. Somebody who you're related to is connected to these people, and there's a lot of need still out there. So let us not be selfish. Every one of us should do the little that we can do to assist. If there's some way that you can assist in reaching out to a family in Carriacou, whether it means that you can adopt a family and help with some construction material, help with a window, a sheet of galvanized, some ply, let us do that. Let's put all our hands together, all hands on deck, and until everybody gets the help that they need. One person being affected is too many persons being affected for us to ignore. I know from the most of Grenada, it feels like everything is normal, but for me, it is still not normal. I cannot sleep as normal because every time the rain falls, I remember that person out there who is uncomfortable. And even when rain is not falling, there are people out there who are really uncomfortable. So let us all as a community do what it takes to help our neighbors. And I believe God will be happy with us for it, and Grenada will be a lot better for it.
Bishop Rashay, thank you so much for appearing on this week's edition of the Bub Report, sir.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Absolutely, absolutely. Viewers and listeners, Bishop Devon Rashay, he is the regional coordinator of Operations Christmas Child of the Caribbean and the Pacific, which is a subsector of Samaritans Purse. They were able to deliver life-saving relief to the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique following the ravages caused by Hurricane Beryl. He was able to give us an extensive overview of the work that Samaritans Purse has been able to do following the passage of Hurricane Beryl, and the work that Samaritans Purse needs to continue to do. Of course, I did not ask Mr. Rashay, so I'm going to bring him back because I think it's important that for those who want to contribute to Samaritans Purse, Pastor, Bishop, how can they go about doing that? Because I think it's important for those who want to give back.
Certainly. SamaritansPurse.org. You can go to the website and there is a link there for donating, and whatever you can give would be appreciated by the organization. Samaritans Purse do not push donations in areas that are responding to disasters, so you would not have seen a family donate or whatever the case is.
Okay.
But if you have listened to this and you feel like you really want to donate, you are encouraged to do so. But I do not want people to feel like they are obligated to donate because Samaritans Purse helped. But I appreciate that you did ask, and certainly all the donations that you can give will be appreciated. If you are not able to donate, don't feel bad about it. We are thankful that you just appreciate the work that we have done. And the best that you can do is to keep praying for the organization, that God continues to provide. The organization has been really blessed, and keep praying for all of our volunteers as we continue to serve the best way that we can. And, just keep doing what you can do in your quarter for the Lord. But as many as can donate, your donation is not too large or too small. Just go to SamaritansPurse.org, and there is a link there for donations.
Okay, very well. Thank you, Bishop. I thought that was important for me to make that point because giving back is also important. Viewers and listeners, please stand by. We are going to take a quick break, and we will get back for the second segment of this week's edition of the Bub Report. Please stand by.
Don't go there.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political leader of the party?
I see you've called me here for much more than diplomatic passports. I don't mind that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just stay quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this, so I'm not too sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bub Report. We go there.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
Are people who have always aspired for more, who've always aspired to do better, who've always accepted that not because your mother didn't go to secondary school, you should go. It has always been the other way around. You should aspire.
You've been there for a long time. Want to be Queen of St. Andrews, but yet the problems around you you're not seeing. You can pray yourself out of the problems in St. Andrews.
Some persons were getting pension after 2 terms in office, right? And the persons that work for 26 years plus not getting anything. It's just unfair.
God is good, and God looks after me. You know, not just my wife is no longer here, so both herself and the father up there are looking after me very, very well indeed.
Not a few people that you pick up by the side of the road to run in an election. These are not people that you mustered up and you pulled together a few months before you think an election is going to call, and you say, we want to win an election, so let's come together.
Viewers and listeners, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bub Report. As a reminder, this week's episode was in fact pre-recorded. So we are now going to present a conversation that we had before Hurricane Beryl with the 2 Grenadian conservationists on the state of hawksbill turtles on the island in the state of Grenada, and why conservationists are sounding the alarm that the hawksbill turtles might no longer be a feature of the biodiversity landscape of the state of Grenada. So we will play that conversation, and following that conversation, we will conclude this week's program. That conversation is still a very important conversation. It's not politics or anything like that, but conservation is indeed a very important conversation to have, especially in this climate change era.
Grenada's open hunting season is one of the longest in the Caribbean region.
If we don't do anything today, when my son is an adult, he may not have the opportunity to even see a sea turtle, much less walk with him.
Now, sea turtles have provided the people of the Caribbean region with a source of food, wealth, and cultural inspiration for more than 2,500 years, even back to the pre-Columbian era. They even helped feed the countless European settlers that arrived in the region more than 500 years ago, making colonization possible. Unfortunately, this pressure has led to considerable declines in the region's sea turtle populations. It is estimated, for example, that the green turtles populations in the wider region have declined by over 97% since pre-colonial times, and local extinctions of nesting turtles have been widespread in the region. On top of this, more contemporary threats such as fisheries by catch, marine pollution, and coastal development have had a major impact on the turtles of the Caribbean. Yet, despite it all, some populations have exhibited impressive recoveries and impressive resilience. One such turtle that is also under threat is the hawksbill sea turtle. Now, the hawksbill sea turtles inhabit the tropical and subtropical waters of all of the world's major oceans, including the Caribbean Sea. They get their name from their unique beak-like mouth, which resembles that of a hawk and is perfect for finding food sources in hard-to-reach places. They are the only species of sea turtle that can survive on a diet consisting mainly of sponges. Hawksbill turtles play also a key role in the proper functioning of marine ecosystems. Now, recently, Grenadian conservationists set about on a journey to document not only the decline of that record of the islands between Grenada and Carriacou, and Grenada's underwater beauty and biodiversity. This film is filmed exclusively in Grenada and narrated by Grenadian Roxana John. And here to make sense of this film and the challenges that this unique species of turtle are currently confronting, of course, film director Mr. Nicholas Winkler, conservation photographer, as well as Dr. Kenrick Carter, who is a sea turtle veterinarian who played an important role in gentlemen. That was a tongue twister there for me. Who played an important role in that particular film. And for the folks who did not get an opportunity to see it, certainly Mr. Winkler, I'm sure, will be telling us where the film will be screened. But Mr. Winkler, I want to begin with you, Nicholas, and let us talk about the inspiration behind this film. Why was there a need to do it?
Hello, Kellan. Thanks for having me on. I've been working on sea turtle issues for a number of years. It was the thing that started my career after I finished marine biology, and I did a number of years in frontline conservation. And I passed the baton on to a bunch of other people who have kind of been doing the bulk of the work for the last 10 years. So it's an issue that's been close to my heart. I think it's an issue that, as you pointed out, we've been protecting leatherbacks since 2001, but green turtles and hawksbills have not been offered the same protection. And it was really important to sort of kind of bring that to light. I mean, we really are in a global biodiversity crisis, and we're at a time where we really need to kind of address this issue in a really big way.
Mm-hmm. And how long did this film take to produce? Of course, in some of the previews that I saw, I know a lot of diving occurred. You guys spent a lot of time going to the nesting sites. You spent a lot of time. I don't want to give away a lot of what was done, but in putting everything together, how long did that take for you?
The actual filming was probably the quickest part. It was about 5 weeks in the field in Grenada, up in Sateres and up in the islands. And the editing probably took about 6 months, and then the post-processing probably took another 4 or 5 months. So, I would say close to a year to finish the entire project.
Mm-hmm. Of course, he's also a son of St. David's, a son of Pomerose, I believe, or Latant. I may be subject to correction, but we are both from the same area. You see, greatness comes from that part of the country. But Dr. Carter, as a vet, as a sea turtle vet, because of course we know that when people think of vets in Grenada, I suspect they only think of vets in the context of their pet dogs and cats and maybe their livestock and things like that. But talk to us about your role as a vet in relation to turtle conservation.
Hi, Kellan. Thanks again for having me on the show. Well, my primary income would be as a veterinary surgeon. I do treat all the dogs and cats and livestock, but I'm also a wildlife and sea turtle veterinarian. So with sea turtles here in Grenada, it's not as much as in some of the other places in the world, but I do have to do the odd turtle rehabilitation when there's a sick or injured turtle. Every now and then we might have a sea turtle surgery to do. We also have an area where we check on just general health assessment of turtles. In most of the projects we do with live turtles in the water, for instance, I will be there to collect biological samples, make sure their healths are okay, check for parasites. Also have to make sure the environment is really good, So I check the turtle as well as the environment of the sea turtle.
Now, in Winkler's film, one of the things that he talks about is just the threats from built coastal development that we're seeing, especially in the Liverpool area, which is supposed to be this Ramsomere conservation site. Well, really, if based on what's happening there now, I don't know how they can still call that a conservation site. But talk about those coastal development threats that turtles confront and the injuries that results in them as a result.
So, Kellan, I'll have to add in 2 scientific terms. I promise not to be too scientific this afternoon, right? But we call HYRA, human-induced rapid environmental change. And that's what you're mentioning there. As well, you're changing the coastline, you're taking off these natural habitat that these animals developed over generations, and you're changing it. A lot of the coastline in Grenada, which was prime nesting habitat, is now filled with hotels, beachfront properties, a lot of bright lights. And sea turtles, the other scientific term would be what you call an evolutionary trap. So sea turtle lives in the ocean. However, they have evolved where they come to shore at least once every year, every couple of years, to nest, to lay their eggs. So that evolutionary trap, when they get back to shore, this used to be a secluded beach. Now it's filled with lights, it's filled with a hotel, there's a swimming pool there. And in other countries where actually these turtle populations are much larger, you have entanglement in sea nets, entanglement in fences, they're stuck in rocks, they're stuck in swimming pools. In Grenada, however, our turtles are heavily pressured by hunting in the open hunting season. So in the nesting season, our population are actually getting smaller and smaller. So we don't have a lot of issues where sea turtles are being stuck in swimming pools, but we have a lot of issues with the hatchlings. Hatchlings would be in hotel swimming pool, hotel dinner areas that's close to the beach. Even a few weeks ago, I had to go remove some hatchling from a hotel in the south.
At a hotel in the south, because they were nesting, of course, close to a beach there.
They nested
Right.
on one of the popular beaches, and when the hatchling hatched, they're normally attracted to bright lights. Another thing that they evolved to, because before the artificial lights, the brightest light in the night would actually be the sea, the reflection of the moon on the seawater. So hatchlings moved towards that bright light, and unfortunately, they hatched when there was activity going on in the hotel, so they moved towards the lights on the property. So they were all disoriented, walking around in circles, and had to be rescued.
So that bright light, it causes that disorientation in the turtles as well. And of course, you mentioned the hunting, which of course speaks to that open season. I suspect you probably experienced turtles that were injured. Perhaps they escaped from a hunter. Have you ever encountered those turtles? And talk about some of the scope and range of injuries that they experience as a result of that human hunting activity.
I think, unfortunately, a lot of the times these turtles meet a hunter, they don't escape it. The hunting strategy, if you use seine net, I know green turtles mostly caught by seine nets, they're already trapped in the net.
Okay.
Hawksbill turtles are normally hit by poachers and people when they're nesting or near nesting. So they might shoot them with a spear gun. You see spear gun injuries to the neck. I had a loggerhead turtle a couple of years back at Grandlands Beach who had a spear gun injury. Loggerheads are a really big-headed turtle. And someone shot it with a spear gun, but it didn't die and it escaped. But that injury had it. It could not feed properly, and I had to euthanize it. The other things you may see is missing flippers. Other than active hunting, you might have sometimes people entangling turtles in fishing line and fishing nets. So the leatherbacks, for instance, we have a lot of gaff injuries where the fishermen on the trawlers would probably just gaff the turtle to get it off their line. Some people would chop them. So you have a lot of chops with machete, for instance. You might meet a nesting leatherback on the beach. They chop them with a machete, trying to kill them. But it's a really big turtle, so it runs back to the water with a big chop on them. That would be human-induced. Some of the areas in the region also have stray dogs that would go up and eat the back flipper while they're nesting. So while they're laying the nest, a stray dog would go and eat the flippers. But we don't have that problem in Grenada because we don't have a lot of stray dogs on the beach. But there's other countries in the region where we'd have nesting turtles being eaten by dogs. So it's sort of a thing.
Yeah. And Nicholas, I'm going to bring you back here. Of course, your film is aptly titled Open Season. Yeah. And of course, when we think of open season, I think I just think of it's just open season on something, which is never a good articulation, right? When somebody says it's open season on something,
right,
it means that they're really taking advantage. So talk about the inspiration or the thinking behind the way that you titled the film.
I mean, I guess that's never an easy thing to do when you're trying to title something, especially a film when there's so much else out there. I mean, I think it kind of just came naturally as the process of the storytelling took place. Effectively, the film is about highlighting the fact that we have this issue in Grenada where we have this open hunting season that is one of the longest in the region, if not the world. It is a legal season that is legislated to be open legally, but also that we have this issue that we also have an overlap with the open hunting season, with the nesting season. So you can have nesting turtles swimming around in Grenada, when they're visiting the islands to reproduce. And you end up in this situation where they can be legally hunted. And these are critically endangered animals. And Grenada has made international commitments to biodiversity conservation. And so I think it was really important to highlight a lot of those issues.
Mm-hmm. But in speaking of those commitments that Grenada have made on paper, to what extent are those commitments being enforced?
But I think the answer is in the question itself. I think, we look at the coming Montreal Convention on Biodiversity just in 2022, and Grenada was one of the parties. and we have a number of conventions dating back to maybe the late 80s, the early 90s that we have signed and ratified. And we're quite happy to go around, looking for international money for biodiversity conservation, but we don't really live up to that when it comes to sea turtles at home.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now let us dig deeper into the hunting season for this specific turtle, the hawksbill turtle, which is different from the hunting. Well, the leatherback turtle, I don't think they can hunt them anymore.
The leatherbacks have been protected entirely since
right.
2001. Yeah.
And do you remember what got us to a place where we decided that we're going to be protecting the leatherback turtles? Is it because of the activism of conservationists who said that we can't be doing this?
I think it was a combination of that. I think there was a recognition in the early 2000s, particularly in the Atlantic regions, but also in the Pacific, where leatherback populations were probably extremely on the brink of extinction, and there was a lot of international effort to bring that around. In Grenada, we had at Levera, which is the third largest nesting site for leatherbacks, I think something in the order of 90-95% of egg poaching, which has a massive impact on the sustainability of the population. So, even if you wanted to consume sea turtle eggs going forward, kind of ripping out 95% of the eggs off the beach is not a sustainable way to do it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So let us talk about the hunting season for the current hawksbill turtle, which is the subject of your documentary. How long is it, and what impacts have we been seeing in respect of how the hunting seasons, at least the length of the hunting season, causes that unsustainable decline in its population?
Well, the open hunting season is about 7 months long, and it, like as I mentioned earlier, it overlaps with a critical part of their life cycle, which is nesting. And turtles come to our islands to nest, but then they will migrate elsewhere to forage. As you see in the film, we have the teams that were working on the turtles. We're putting satellite tags on them, and then we were able to see their movement. So you have this really critical overlap between an important part of their nesting cycle and their life cycle. But also, hawksbills are the most endangered reptile, and we've lost about 80% of their population in the last century. And as you said in your opener, I think a lot of that is a consequence of colonial contact and the exploitation from European powers in the region. But the fact is, we live with those consequences of that. And unfortunately, we also have to pick up those pieces. Ocean Spirits has been working in sea turtle conservation for 25 years. So, that is a relationship that happens with fisheries. That is not a relationship that happens in a vacuum. So the authorities are aware of this issue, at least at the fisheries level. I can't speak for the new administration that's only been recently in power. But the idea that this issue might be new, it's been around for a long time, and it's an issue that Ocean Spirits has been working for a very, very long time. The footage and the activities that you see in the film of the teams going up to the island, I used to be one of the guys diving, like the fishermen that you see, I would say about 10 years ago. So this program has been running for a long time, and yet this data gets sent to fisheries annually with reports of the activities of Ocean Spirits, and yet we've not really had much change. I believe several years ago there was a brief shortening of the season by about a month, but that's about all we've been able to achieve since leatherbacks are protected over 20 years ago.
Nicholas, we're going to go on to talk about the film itself and who is featured in the film, and of course without wanting to give too much away, but can you talk about specific highlights in the film that you believe an audience would find fascinating, that they would have these very serious takeaways after watching it that would be etched in their minds following watching the film?
Absolutely. I think one of my inspirations was, I've had the privilege to dive around Grenada for most of my adult life. I've had the privilege to spend a lot of time up in the islands and diving the waters where the film is shot. And one of the really big things that I wanted to do was to showcase, what Grenada looks like underwater, because I think very few people get to see that. I wanted to showcase the islands because I think also very few people get to see that. So I wanted to tell this story of Grenada and have Grenadians be able to witness it. But also, I think really critical is that a lot of this work that you see happening up in the islands with Ocean Spirits and the team that Carter is part of, is that this is not possible without the fishermen who have this really unique skill in being able to free dive, so hold their breath and get down fairly deep underwater, in some cases 50, 60 feet. And then they're chasing an animal that is effectively designed to swim and hold their breath for a very long time under the water, that have evolved for millions of years to do just that. So it is really sort of this unique skill that they have the ability to stalk these animals and go down and get a hold of them and bring them up so that the team can tag them and research them. And I think that is pretty special. And I think that people would be very I guess impressed by the skills of Grenada's fishermen in some respect.
Mm-hmm. Is that what is called free diving? Is that what they call that?
Yeah, free diving is the act of holding your breath to go underwater. So you're not wearing a scuba tank, so you're really reliant on your own ability to hold your breath long enough, and also the confidence to go down and do that. And if you kind of think about it, holding a 350 pound adult hawksbill that once you grab it is going to fight to get away from you, and you have to sort of come back up. So that imagine holding your breath and trying to run or fight somebody. It's quite a feat.
With a 350 pound turtle, while holding your breath without the aid of those diving tanks or whatever it is they use at such depth. But one of the things that you just mentioned here is just the biodiversity, the rich biodiversity of the islands in Northern Grenada. Yes? And so how much of those islands were featured in the film, or at least the underwater environs in that area?
Sure. So we mostly concentrate around the islands that are immediately north of Grenada. So I think the furthest we would go is maybe La Tante. So there are still some other islands beyond that, between that and Carriacou. But that's where the majority of the work takes place. Once you get to La Tante, there's quite a much bigger distance to get to the next set of islands, and it becomes less feasible. But the other reason we work in that area, because on one of those islands, it's one of the last true nesting beaches for hawksbill. It is really one of the last stronghold. There's one other nesting beach in Carriacou that sees some hawksbill with regularity. So that site is extremely important.
Absolutely. Now, in respect of the nesting sites in Livera, I suspect that is totally under threat now with what's happening up there, that monstrosity that's being constructed up there.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think, again, Ocean Spirits and others in civil society have been sort of dealing with this development issue at Livera for, the better part of 25, 30 years. And, it is the reality that we have to, constantly fight this idea of what is the right economic framework going forward. It is appreciated that, St. Patrick's is one of the poorest parishes in Grenada. But ultimately, I think if that development goes ahead, I'm not very optimistic that Livera as a nesting beach will survive, or that the Ramsar site or the pond around there will retain any ecological integrity at all.
Now, let us talk about the work that Ocean Spirits is doing to track the turtles, or at least the numbers in respect of the hawksbill turtles. What is that work looking like? I don't want to give away what's in the film, but I do know that a lot of tracking work is done. And how valuable is that tracking work in documenting whether it's that further decline, as you articulated, or if in fact the turtles are also showing resilience?
I think hawksbills have shown resilience by the fact that they're still around after the exploitation that they've faced over the last century and some. The work that Ocean Spirits has done is largely by tagging them, and there's several different ways you can do that. Flipper tags, which are these metal tags that go on the flipper of the turtle, are a very passive way of doing it, and it's been around for a long time because it's very low tech. But Ocean Spirits was able to last year, for the very first time, to put 5 satellite tags on hawksbills and show their sort of migration routes. So we had 2 go across the entire Western Caribbean basin, several thousand kilometers. And then we had 3 others that stayed, went up to as far as St. Lucia. And I think that is something we knew already based on migration patterns and studies done on other islands, but it really goes to show our interdependence with conservation. So when you have a place like Barbados that fully protects their hawksbills, and we share that population with them because they migrate back and forth for foraging and nesting, when we're not protecting and we're not meeting our biodiversity commitments, both internationally and nationally, we're effectively sort of borrowing from their good effort, and we're undermining their efforts. So I think the tracking really shows that interconnectivity, and that we're a world that kind of has to collaborate together to meet our biodiversity targets.
Absolutely, and of course, Dr. Carter isn't here, but in respect of the let's see, Dr. Carter, we can't see you. We still can't see you. Yes, we cannot see you, sir. But but talk about the role that Dr. Carter played in collecting a lot of the blood samples of some of the hawksbills there, and what will happen to those blood samples?
So Dr. Carter, as you rightly pointed out, is a veterinarian by trade and training. So he has the skill and the knowledge and the understanding of the anatomy and the physiology of turtles in order to be able to draw blood and sort of assess these animals in a way that is safe for them. The blood work is partly to sort of get a baseline of health data. So one of the big things in wildlife research is, you don't have access to a lot of data for these wild populations. So understanding how these turtles are as a baseline health and being able to track change over time, that's kind of really important for a broader set of research. But also there's an element of genetic research that is taking place in order to understand genetically how the turtles that we have in Grenada, the ones that visit Grenada, again, because we share them with other places and because they go back and forth through the seasons, is getting an understanding genetically how our populations that we have here are connected to others either in the Caribbean, the wider region, or in the Atlantic region.
Talk about the film that you produced. Where can citizens in the national community have an opportunity to watch the documentary? When will be the premiere date? What would the launch look like?
So we've already had a couple of community screenings, and it was really important for me to have the first screening up in Sautères, because that is where the film effectively where the teams leave from to go up to the islands, and where the fishermen are based, and really where people are living when they go do that kind of work. So we had a small community event there, and then we had another one down in Trublu. This was in the last couple of weeks. And both were really well attended and really well sort of, the reception was really good. Effectively, the film is currently available online internationally. So if anybody in the diaspora would like to see it, they can go to grenadaturtles.com, and there's a couple of different ways to see it. It's currently on a paywall internationally, because the film is currently under consideration at about half a dozen film festivals around the world, so in Europe and North America. And as Carter, if we had him back on here, because if it wasn't for the technology issues, him and Ocean Spirits are going to take this film around to different stakeholders around the island, including schools. Ocean Spirits usually does a summer camp for school children, so the film will feature there. It has been submitted to the Grenada Film Festival, which occurs, I believe, in October. So I'm waiting to hear back whether it gets picked up there. And then Grenada also hosts a Dive Conservation Fest around September this year. So preliminary, the film would be featured there as well. And I suspect within the end of the year, a little bit more, once it's gone through the film festival cycle, we'll give it a wider public release for everybody to get a chance to see it.
Including, I hope, the folks in the government who are signatories to these conventions that we do not enforce. That we get funding for, but we do not enforce. Dr. Carter, welcome back, sir. We've been having some internet issues there, and that's how it is sometimes. But Dr. Carter, you were talking earlier, sir, about the hunting season, and I think that's what we lost you. So you want to continue from there?
Yes, Kellan. Thanks for having me back. The connection.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So the issue is hawksbill turtles. Their main nesting time would be June, July, August. However, they will nest right down to the end of the year, some as late as January. Now, the open hunting season would be September towards the end of March. So that's right when you have nesting hawksbill turtle. Another thing you would need to know about hawksbill turtles is that when they nest, in the nesting period, you have adult males hanging around close to the coastal line, as well as nesting females will be close to shore. So what happens is they're now vulnerable to spear fishermen, people pulling seine nets, and other hunters. So you have an open hunting season with a species in the nesting habitat right in the nesting period. So they're very vulnerable. So as a result, every hawksbill turtle we lose in that period would be a nesting adult hawksbill. The other thing people do, hawksbill turtle is different to the green turtle, for instance. If you're going to separate them, green turtle is primarily hunted for their meat. Everybody call it the sea chicken. Hawksbill turtles are hunted, the juveniles and immature ones are hunted for the entire body. They would actually be frozen or put in agar or something and kept as trinkets, as souvenirs. Their scutes or the shell, the carapace, the back of the turtle, actually used to make jewelries, combs, and all sorts of things. Sunglasses, reading glasses, glasses frame. So they're predated on for the meat, not as well as the shell, and sometimes the entire body. So
Nicholas, any final comments before we get to the next segment of the program?
Sure. I want to say, this is an issue that's been long standing in Grenada, and Grenada, the previous administration has done, did very little to bring about change as far as the conservation and the protection of hawksbills. And I think we kind of have a newer, younger government that really has the opportunity to take the baton and run with an issue that really is a bit of a low-hanging fruit in terms of the ability to do something. But it's not just about changing the legislation. I think there's also has to be a wider societal understanding that if we want to, swim with sea turtles in the future, if we want to have these animals around, we cannot exploit them at the rate that we are doing, because ultimately it's a little bit like, overdrawing your bank account. At some point, you kind of run out of money, and the bank's going to come after you. But in this case, the ocean's just going to be empty of turtles in Grenada, and I think now is the time to act, and I hope this government will have the courage to enact legislation, but also to enforce it.
That enforcement bit, I think, is also critical, because you can have legislation that sounds good on paper, but if you're not going to be enforcing the hunting season, because as I understand it, sometimes a lot of the folks don't even acknowledge the hunting season. They still hunt during the hunting season. So you have that as well.
Yeah, as you see in the film, there's an instant where a poached turtle is discovered, and that turtle was actually poached in the closed season. So, we have an open and closed season, but this conversation is also a little bit moot if we don't enforce the laws that we have on the books already, let alone look forward to other laws. So I think it's going to be a whole society engagement, and I hope the film brings more awareness to the importance of the issue and the work that people are doing to get there.
Absolutely. Viewers and listeners, Mr. Nicholas Winkler, he is a conservation photographer, and before him we had Dr. Kenrick Carter. Viewers and listeners, this has been yet another edition of the Bub Report. On behalf of the producers of this program, I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bub, thanking you for joining us for this week's edition of the Bub Report. We will see you next week for another installment of the program. Take care now. Bye-bye.